Hi there, this is Ronnie and Wiz Kids coming at you with a video. I've just watched Sean Connor's latest video on his channel, um, answering 5 questions that have been posed by Andre Martinez. So I'm going to answer the same 5 questions myself. I'll list the 5 questions below so that if you want you can make your own videos answering them as well. So I'm just going to kick right into it. Question 1, is roleplay gaming a lifestyle or a pastime for you? I have to say the answer is a bit of both. It's very much a pastime first and foremost. It's a hobby. But I mean, I suppose if someone were to ask me, what do I identify myself as, I would identify myself as a gamer. So I guess if such a thing could be called a lifestyle, then, you know, I guess that's part of it. I certainly gaming, tabletop gaming in general, role-playing specifically, is very much part of my social structure. So in that respect, it is a lifestyle and one I enjoy. What aspect of role-playing gaming do you think is lacking attention by the industry? Sean Connor's actually mentioned female gamers, and I would agree, but I would extend that to really tackling minorities in general. And what I mean by that is this: there is an assumption that role players are predominantly white heterosexual males, and most of the artwork, most of the ideology seems to support that they are the target, and I don't think that's really fair on role-playing games. As someone who has players who are not white, players who are not male, and players who are not heterosexual, I know that role-playing games do appeal to those audiences, but I think more could be done. There are certainly games. Sean picked on the World of Darkness games, particularly Vampire. I would agree with that. There is Blue Rose by Green Ronin, which tackles similar, is an attempt at fantasy, but with a broader canvas, dealing with minorities. But I think it's something that could be done better and more focused to show that our hobby is an inclusive hobby, because it is an inclusive hobby. Question 3, are you going to buy the new D&D Next and its miniatures from Wiz Kids? No and no. Why am I not buying D&D Next? Don't need it. Simple answer. Whilst I've looked through D&D 3, D&D 3.5, D&D 4, I've never bought them. I have a glut of fantasy games, ranging from Dragon Warriors and Dragon Age, through Dark Dungeons, Pendragon, Savage Worlds with its fantasy companion, Song of Ice and Fire. I simply have all the fantasy games I need, so I see no reason to buy another. As for miniatures, I'm on record as saying that I don't use miniatures in role-playing games. I have nothing against miniatures for wargaming, skirmish games and so on, but role-playing, I don't like them, so I've never used them. And as such, I won't be buying them. Question 4, what games would you like to see played out in an actual play section? I'd like to see lots of different styles of games played out. I'd like to see fantasy games played out. of differing levels. I mean, you know, I'm sure Pathfinder will get a, or D&D Next and D&D 4th and so on will get a look in, but let's look at something like Dark Dungeons. Let's look at something like Sundered Skies for the Savage Worlds setting. Let's look at Blue Rose. Let's look at some horror games. Let's look at some generic sci-fi games and some specific sci-fi games. Let's look at modern day games. Let's show the length and breadth of the hobby. I think we run. You know, one of the other problems, going back to question 2, is that I think outside our hobby, when you say role-playing games, people immediately think high fantasy. And it's true that high fantasy is probably the biggest of us. But we still have high fantasy as a game, as you know, is our image, and there's so much more going on. I'd also like to see some of the rarer games or out of print games maybe getting a try. Some of these games that people maybe don't know about. Last year I ran a small game of Castle Falkenstein. Come back to that in a minute for question 5. And it went down very well with the players. But moreover, by the end of it, they were like, wow, this is a really good system. Well, how come I've never heard of it? And part of that reason is because it was released in the 90s and there was a bit of a downturn role-playing wise. But also I think because if anything is outside that sort of classic high fantasy setting, it tends to get lost in terms of promotion within the hobby, certainly, but even less of a promotion outside the hobby. I mean, outside the hobby is still convinced the world, you know, role-playing games start, begin and end with D&D. And so I'd like to see lots of different kinds of games. Games that will attract beginners, games that will attract people who like a rules-light game, games that will attract people who like a lot of crunch. Yeah, let's show the length and breadth of the hobby. 5th and final question. Have you ever tried a diceless game, or would you try one if it was proposed to you? Now this really depends on your definition of diceless game. If you're talking about a game that doesn't use dice but uses another sort of randomizer, then I would say, well, yeah, because I play Castle Falkenstein, which is a high fantasy steampunk setting that uses playing cards rather than dice. It's been my go-to game since I bought it in the mid-90s, and I still use it today. So in that respect, yes, I have tried a diceless game. If we're talking about a game that has absolutely no randomizers involved, something like Amber, or there's a free one which I've gotten from Drive-Thru RPG called Active Exploits, that doesn't use any sort of randomizer, I'm up for trying it. I got Active Exploits specifically to have a go at it. It's an interesting concept where you have stats and then you have a pool, sort of points pool that you can use to augment your skills at certain junctures, which is kind of interesting for me. I like that idea. I would give it a go. I think one of the interesting possibilities of diceless gaming is doing it over the internet. Yes, there are apps you can use and so on to augment dice rolling, but I think if you're not actually around a table using dice, I think a diceless game feels more natural over the internet. So I would recommend something like Falkenstein or Active Exploits or Amber. Something that doesn't require a dice. So depending on your definition, I either have tried a diceless game and love it, or I haven't yet tried it, but I'm more than willing to. So that's my 5. Would love to hear your answers, and I'll be back soon with another video.